Hello, I'm Reverend Paul Gaspar, and for over 30 years I've been helping people with life and living. And again, as usual, tonight the gals are gonna ask me some questions, and hopefully I'll come up with some answers. Hope you enjoy it.
Fear has many forms: insecurity, worry, and stress. Why does it isolate us? Why aren't people free to be able to share their fears?
Well, as we were talking earlier, pride, ego, I know, I don't have to ask. It's like you see people all the times, going around the parking lot aimlessly. They forgot where they parked or they don't know where, they're not going to ask. Directions, they say guys have trouble asking for directions. Freedom, they have no freedom to ask. They want you to think that they know, and that's important to them. They don't realize how foolish they really are.
How would you advise somebody in terms of getting the freedom?
Oh, it's through the sharing. That's what we talk about all the time. In the sharing comes the caring, comes the love. And by the time you get through the caring, you know how to share, and you're starting to get peace and freedom more and more all the time. Okay? So instead of it being all depleted from you, it starts to go the other way, like self-worth, dignity, self-respect. When they're on the rise, you're going to feel a lot better. When your gas tank is empty, the car's not going anywhere. And it's the same with us humans. When our self-worth and our dignity and our self-respect is low, we don't feel good. Some people say they're depressed, right? How come they're depressed? Because they're not helping anybody. They're not doing the things that elevate themselves. They just keep draining an empty tank. They're going nowhere.
Are there meetings that people can go to where sharing takes place and they can learn how to give to other people?
Well, they can call us. There isn't many places like what we know, Brentwood in Canada. That's one place in a very large world, right? So we need to start these groups, but they have to be taught how to run them. That's one of the reasons why we're doing these videos, with the hopes that this really does bother me. Churches, ministers, priests, they don't want us coming to their churches. Why? Because they don't want us telling people what we're talking about, because they don't know how to do it. They're afraid, right? And what do the people say? How come my mister doesn't teach us this? How come he doesn't show us how? It's because he doesn't know, or he's afraid to do it, right? It is very sad, because really and truly, it's like I don't want to get into the Bible reading, but reading the Bible doesn't do you any good unless you start living it. You can read any book you want, but if you don't start doing what it says with the people God puts in your life, what good was the book? Make sense?
Yes.
It's like the Our Father. Give us this day our daily bread. What does that mean? I often make the joke, it doesn't mean corned beef sandwiches. Our daily bread is the people. God puts the people in our life every day that we need and that need us. But if we're in a spin, if we're in such a hurry, we don't recognize them, we don't take a few moments to share with them, it's all for nothing. We miss out. We don't see the value in people. And that's what life's all about, the sharing with others. But if we don't see value in them, why should we share with them? Right?
So the more we share with people, the less fear we're going to have.
Oh, absolutely.
The more secure we're going to become, and the more confident,
right.
And we'll be better able to live our life in a meaningful way.
Oh, and women ask me this all the time. Why do they keep, we did a video on this, I think, last year, about why do women keep picking the wrong guy? It's because they don't share. So their spiritual gifts are low. If they were practicing these gifts in the sharing, they would not only marry these guys, they would run away from them because they would know in their heart, these guys are selfish. They just want to use me for their own selfish purposes. You know, there's a huge difference between feeling loved and making love. It really shouldn't be called that. Very few people have spiritual sex. I mean, great sex. In 40, 50 years, only a few times. Because most of the time, lovemaking is selfish. Ask any married woman, she'll tell you. Now, a lot of people won't want to listen to me now. The truth, if your heart's not open, the truth is just insulting. And you'll take it that way. But what we're trying to do is get people to do the opposite of their selfishness by sharing. Because the more you share, you won't be selfish with your wife anymore. You won't be selfish with your kids or the neighbors or your coworkers. Because once you start to share, the healing in your heart takes place. And the pain and the secrets, they go away. And you now have freedom. And you don't care who's listening or because you're at peace with yourself. Okay? And Father used to say, that guy says, I could care less. And that's right. And if a person says that to you, can you hear what they're really saying? I could care less.
They don't care.
That's right. They don't really care about others. And they can't care about themselves. God had to make life simple so we could catch on. But the vast majority of people in the world don't catch on. They'll go to their graves never really experiencing love or acceptance, forgiveness.
Trust.
Oh, huge, huge. And why dysfunction? Why are families so dysfunctional? What is the reason families are so dysfunctional all over the world? Because they weren't taught how to love one another. They weren't taught how to forgive one another. They weren't taught how to accept one another, how to be there for one another. So they don't know. So what happens is one of the parents, it's usually one, like in my case, my father died first. But as long as my father was alive, all of the children got together, the grandchildren. Why? Because they were all searching for that love and they wanted it. Once my dad died, it was over. The gatherings were over, the get-togethers were over, and now no one talks to each other. It's sad. And why? Because the love was never really there. Because if you love, you want that person. You need that person. He's part of you. You want to see them. You want to talk to them. You want to have food with them.
I don't get the part where you say they all went to go see your dad, but then afterwards they didn't.
Well, because they thought they wanted my father to love them. I think they pretty much knew they weren't going to get it from my mother. But they thought they could get it from my father.
Oh, okay.
My parents weren't bad people, but they did know how to love. My father was a provider. Most men, they do that. They can provide for their families. But there's a lot more to being a man or a woman than just providing money. We have to provide security, right? Spiritual security, knowing that you're going to be there, that you can listen to them, that you can share with them, that you can kiss the boo-boo. Eh? Not too many people have that. And that's why. Because if we knew how to love, you don't have to tell somebody what you need if they love you. They already know. Because love, there's wisdom in love. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Right? If we loved, people would ask you. They would include you. They would invite you. But in the selfishness, they say, hey, I can do this myself. I don't need help. Right? People don't want to pay for counseling. Why? Well, I don't need it. and it can be expensive. That's why our rates are so low, so we can try to help more people. It's the selfishness. And it gets most people, it's out of control. Right? It's quite sad. And I know as a child, I was taken for counseling through the school, church, but by the time I was 11, it was over for me. My heart was closed. I knew they didn't care, they wouldn't care, and that pain controlled me all my life. That I wasn't good enough to be cared about. My mother and father couldn't care for me, or wouldn't. I didn't know why. I was a child. So the school, I was probably 11. I wasn't 12 yet. I remember that. My dad he used to physically punish me. He thought that would break me, I guess. And at school one day, we played basketball, and the teacher would go shirt, skin, and the kids with the T-shirts would be the shirt team, and the kids without them would be the skin team. Well, my dad used to whip me, and my blood vessels would break and blister, and it was ugly, and I was ashamed, and I didn't want the other kids to see me. So when the teacher told me I asked him, I begged him to let me be on the shirt team, and he just said, "Gaspar, get back in line and do as you're told." Well, by that time, I just couldn't anymore. So I said, no, I'm not doing it. So what do you think these teachers did? Because I defied them, they took me in the office and strapped me. And because I was so dysfunctional, after they strapped me, I took off my shirt. One teacher started crying while the other called the police. And I never lived home again. That was it.
What do you mean by they strapped you?
Well, in Catholic school, they have I think it was a piece of rubber or something, and it maybe had a piece of metal in it because it was not real flexible, and they would just strap your hand a few times each. That was a corporal punishment or whatever of the policy back then in the 50s and 60s. And so the children's aid got involved. I became a ward of the province, and I lived in foster homes with relatives, detention homes, like orphanage, that type of place. And when I was a teenager, I kept running away from them, and finally a judge declared me an adult, and the children's aid had no control over me anymore. And then I tried to become a human being with no qualifications whatsoever, absolutely none. So I had to work. I had to make a living. I had to rent a room, and eventually I had to buy a car, and life and living. And then I couldn't. Relationships with girls didn't work because I didn't know. I knew how to go out and have a good time, but I didn't know the serious part. I didn't know the real caring part, the loving part, because I wasn't taught that. So anyway, was there another question along that line? I'm getting off topic here, maybe.
What advice would you give to somebody who has been through a similar situation like yours?
Oh, that's easy. Go to Brentwood. It saved my life. It saved my marriage. Got me a daughter. It was a miracle. It was an absolute miracle.
And what if they're unable to go to Brentwood?
Well,
what other place would you recommend?
I don't know of any other place. I just don't know. That's why we're doing what we do here, because there really isn't another place that has the spiritual guidelines to take you from such unhappiness to wholeness again. And that's what Brentwood, I refer to it as a spiritual boot camp, because they could strip you down and put you back together again with some dignity, some self-worth, self-respect. Because when you're not loved, you don't have those things. I met lots of rich people that had no self-worth. It's quite sad, because they think because they have money, everything's okay. But they know deep inside, they know something's, they don't know what's wrong, but they know something is very wrong. And that's why when we talk about addiction, I really don't believe in it. I have a degree in drug and alcohol abuse, but it's escape, because we're not mature. We can't deal with our feelings. So we use sex, drugs, 5 football games in one day, gambling, whatever, to escape these feelings. And what do? We do things that aren't good for us. They aren't good for other people.
So how's your marriage today?
Well, I'd say that back in 1980, it was 25% good. It was rough because I didn't know how to be a man. I didn't know how to be a husband. I certainly would not have known how to be a father, which was my greatest concern about having children, because I knew there was something wrong. Something was hurting me, and relationships were always a problem. They demanded something of me that I just did not have. So when we got an opportunity to get Maggie, I asked Father Paul, I said, am I spiritually mature enough to be a father? He smiled and hugged me. He said, no problem, Paul. Boy, I tell you, that gave me some confidence, right? So when she was born, I just kept doing this and practicing and helping others, because I wanted to be a good father, a good husband, a good neighbor.
How is your marriage today?
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. It's probably the one thing of my life that's just been really good since Brentwood. Every year. It's 38 years now. And of course, I married a woman who was the finest person I've ever known. So, and the reason is I constantly try to break the back of my selfishness every day. I'm not, as you know, I'm not always successful, but I try. That is because that's the key to life. If you can bend the selfishness, you'll have peace and joy and happiness that God talks about. But if we don't, it's just going to be an uphill battle. And then the love. I've never felt the peace and the joy and the love I feel today. That's been my gift. I never had it. I was 31 when I started this. I thought there was no hope, right? And now I know there's a joke. They used to say this. I forgot now how it went about hope. If there's hope for Paul Gaspar, there's hope for everybody, or something. They used to have that sign up at Brentwood. But that is, and the more we share, the better life is for you and for everyone else. It just gets better. I started to talk about that men's group I was in for 8 years. These men, most of them didn't get it. They just think, read the Bible, and do nothing about it. That doesn't work. You've got to give to your fellow man. How do you love your neighbor if you don't talk to him? That's not possible, right? Just donating money to your church, that doesn't give you peace, joy, or happiness. It's actually sharing with someone else, being part of, being there for them, and letting them be there for you. That's spirituality. That's the Holy Spirit in work. But without that, we're just spitting in the wind. So, and a lot of people, okay, I'm being told that we're running out of time. So thanks for listening. I hope it's been of some help to you. And
Please follow us on our social media. The links will be below. And if you want to make an appointment, you could do that too.
All right. Take care.